It's okay. I just have a question actually related to Matthew 19. Verse 9 says, and I say to you, this is the NASB, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. And could you please tell me about the word immorality there and what it means exactly in that context?
Yeah, this is called the exception clause, me epi porneia. And you obviously recognize that term in Greek, porneia, because it has a fairly recognizable form. It's come over into English in pornography and things like that. But porneia is a broad range of sexual sin. And as you probably are aware, in the days of Jesus, there was a very fierce debate going on within rabbinic Judaism regarding the nature of the marriage covenant. And you had the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. And one had a very conservative, limited definition of what was grounds for divorce, which would include, fornication. One had a very, 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 very wide definition. So basically, if your wife burned the toast, you could send her away. And what's interesting is I had never thought of this before. Someone pointed out to me about 15 years ago or so now. But when you think about the Old Testament and the subject of divorce, if your spouse was dead, you were free to remarry. What most people don't think about is, were there not sins that a person in Israel could commit that would result in their execution? And what would therefore happen to their spouse? So you think of one of those really, really, really tough texts. I think it's in Deuteronomy, where you're basically told that even if the wife of your bosom, the wife of your youth who you love, if she secretly says to you, let us go after other gods and worship other gods, you are to report her to the elders and be the first one to cast the stone. Now, you think about something like that. That's tough enough just on its own. But the point is, what that would mean is idolatry under the theocratic structure of Israel would have resulted in a de facto valid divorce. In other words, the Jewish person who fulfilled the law, spouse dies, executed for trying to bring heresy into Israel, that person's free to remarry. And so the question then becomes, in light of that, for example, to use one that's even more relevant to us today, both Leviticus, well, especially Leviticus 20, if your spouse was found, if you're a woman and you discover that your husband is engaging in homosexual behavior, once again, the result would be the cutting of that person off from the people. It would be state-sponsored execution of that person. And what does that mean regards to you? That means that you would be free to remarry. And so what that means is there were a wider number of things that could result in the proper ending of the covenantal marriage relationship, but they were all sin issues. And so is porneia as broad as all of those? Well, okay, it's not like there were 47,000 different things that would cause you to be executed in Israel, but is porneia as broad as idolatry? I think without question, most people would recognize, homosexuality would definitely do it. That would definitely be grounds. But idolatry, some of the other things that would cause you to be cut off, that's really where the debate comes in, because most people would naturally limit that range in light of our English use of pornography or related sexual sins. But that's where the debate is. So that's sort of the something to keep in mind when looking at the exception clause and exactly what it is referring to. But it's hard to not recognize that there is a class of activities that would qualify in Matthew chapter 19, verse 9. Now, I'll tell you as well, there are people who will argue against the originality of that phrase on a textual basis. There is a textual variant. Well, there are a few textual variants at that point. And so there are some who just simply go, get rid of all of it, and there is no exception. Even porneia is not a grounds for the dissolution of the marriage ceremony. I think that's an extreme position, but there are people who take it, so you will encounter it in various books and commentaries and stuff like that you'll run into, because it's a really complicated variant in verse 9. So keep that in mind as well. You might run into that if you're looking things up in things here, there, and everywhere. But so there you go. You unfortunately you'll find entire books written just on that phrase. But that's the best information I can give you.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now,
everything I said may be politically incorrect in Canada, so I need to warn about that, because I don't, I'm almost scared to go up there at times. I'm going to run into one of those human rights commissions or something, and I'm going to get in a bunch of trouble. So yeah, there you go.
So how much further behind are you guys, do you think, in the progressivism of Canada?
We've got people that are trying to outrun you, but it's just that we still have so many of us crusty curmudgeons that we are acting as a little bit of a boat anchor, and so we're not catching up to you. But there's some folks that are rowing pretty hard to try to catch up. No two ways about it.
Well, if you wear a kuji, I don't think you're a curmudgeon. I think that puts you in a different category.
Yes, a crazy curmudgeon maybe, but definitely. Well, you know what? To be honest with you, there is a kuji. Do you know who the knockoff brand of kuji is?
I do not.
Tundra, which is Canadian. And so go find yourself a Tundra from Canada, and they are sometimes even nicer than the Kuji originals. They're really, really pretty. So I was wearing a Tundra yesterday, actually. So yeah, look them up. Rich is about to cut me off from talking more about that on the air. So, well, thank you for your call.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wake.